just because we do have some housekeeping items at the beginning of the meeting that we can start as we admit others. Welcome to our February 3rd CAG meeting.
Bueno, ¿por qué no iniciamos? Bienvenidos a esta reunión y vamos a iniciar ahora porque tenemos algunos otros asuntos que vamos a hacer mientras iniciamos. Bienvenidos a la reunión de febrero del CAG.
Great. So as always at our CAG meetings, we do provide language interpretation. Oops, Beth, if you could go back one slide. And so you will, for interpretation, you will connect using a tablet or a computer. At the bottom right-hand screen momentarily, you will see a globe icon, and you will need to select the language of your preference. And if English is your preferred language, you do need to select English as well.
Bueno, como siempre, nuestras reuniones son bilingües. Eso significa que tenemos interpretación y eso significa que todos los partícipes deben de seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia. Si pueden pulsar el icono de interpretación, el globito que está en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla. Y una vez que lo pulsen, pueden seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia, ya sea inglés o español. Es muy importante que todos seleccionen el idioma de su preferencia para poder escuchar al intérprete. We're good to go, Anthony.
All right. If everyone will select the language of their choice, we will get started. And next slide, please. So again, on behalf of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, I want to welcome community members to our meeting. We are blessed and fortunate that we have an amazing facilitator with us. Oops, that is with us each meeting, and that is Catherine Archuleta, who's going to be facilitating this evening's meeting. So Catherine, take it away.
Thank you, Anthony. Well, welcome everybody to our January meeting with lots of snow on the ground, and it's hard to imagine what all the infrastructure is going to look like when it's covered in white. But I know you have great imaginations, and we'll be talking about quite a few things this evening, including bike improvements, West Colfax, and the pedestrian and transit project. So as we talk about these, we want to reflect on the meeting that we had last month. We talked about what would make these meetings improved and what we can do to engage all of you even more. And so we've taken those to heart. We're going to really work towards talking less and listening more. We're going to work towards deeper dives into issues. And we'll continue to do our best to make sure that all the report outs and the announcements and notices are spread as far as wide as we possibly can, as well as begin to recruit other individuals to join the CAG so that the information that we receive at each of these meetings is really shared throughout the community. I will give one little caution here is that as we move along, and because we only meet once a month, projects do move along in the meantime because Dottie is working hard to get these all done. So we'll continue to try to give you as much information, not only in the meetings and seek your input, but we will also be sharing those on our website. And you can always, if you're not able to get to a meeting and wondering how things are going, is to go to the website to listen to see a video or to watch the recording of the meeting. And also you are always able to call Anthony and he'll connect you with all of the program managers that are working on the many projects that surround West Colfax. So with that, I'm going to introduce Karen Good, who's going to talk about paving.
Thanks, Catherine. Just again, as Catherine mentioned, we want to make sure that this is interactive. So if you have a question, I only have a couple slides, but if you have a question, please do let us know. We will be doing some bike facility improvements along with paving on 17th between Sheridan and Federal, or Federal and Sheridan, depending on which way you look at it and which end you live on. So, and if we could have the next slide. So the corridor today, probably many of you are very familiar with 17th. It's a major collector with a speed limit of 30, and we have no protected facility in this area between Sheridan and Federal. It is also a transit corridor with the number 20 coming by about every 30 minutes, and the sidewalk location and width varies. And we have 3 segments that you'll see at the base of different facility types, with Sheridan to Meade, then Meade to Julian, and Julian to Federal. And go to the next slide. We'll just kind of pop in to some of the planned improvements with protected bike lanes, striped bike lanes, conflict markings where appropriate, as well as potential for crosswalks, stop bars, and signs. We are working through the design and we'll have more information on where exactly each of those will be. This is just more of a heads up that we'll be coming to that open house in March, and we'll also have a pop-up at the park in the middle of March to show some more design and get feedback. And now I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. As you well know, 17th Connect has a lot of destinations on and near it. So this will be a great opportunity to connect destinations as well as existing bikeways and facilities. It'll improve safety, and it fills a big gap in our network. And we want to make sure it's a quality connection for the community. And obviously, as with all of our bike improvements, they also provide significant pedestrian improvements. And next slide, I think, should be my, yay, I got it right, timeline slide. So we've done planning from 2011 through 19, and we are in the middle of our outreach with a really fast turnaround, since we're looking at installing with the paving that is planned for this summer. So as I said, we'll be at the open house early March, and then we'll be hopefully not in the lake, and hopefully the weather will be warmer than today, but we're planning to be out along Sloan's Lake or at a enclosed space near Sloan's Lake on the 16th. So details forthcoming. We'll make sure everyone on this list and outreach has information, and we'll try to get that in council newsletters as well. Then in May, we'll have an additional meeting to go through the design again, finish the design in late spring, and as I mentioned, install in summer. So that's what I've got for you now, just a preview of coming attractions.
So if we can just leave that up and then offer the opportunity for any of our CAG members to ask any questions about the bike lanes. This will give you a sense of where it's coming and going and where it's at right now. And I just wonder if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make to Karen and the planners. Also, you can use the chat to share your ideas. S. Wright. Go ahead.
Hi guys, thank you. I love 17th and ride it on my bicycle frequently. I am wondering about the ends of 17th. So, and part of me, I went to the dentist, so I'm slurring a little bit on the right side of my face is numb. And I also think I was on the leadership team for the Denver Moves bike project back in the day, possibly for West Denver. And I love how the Denver Moves project identified our creek and park and river corridors as ideal places to expand connectivity for walking and biking. And 17th is a perfect example of that. Obviously, you could ride on the lake, or you could ride on the road, which is a little bit faster. But if you get to Sheridan, that is a problematic crossing to get into the shopping area, King Soopers and Ace Hardware and Target and all that. And that crossing is really bad, actually. And then from 17th on the other end, on the on the east side, it kind of just ends at Federal. So it'd be real nice. I mean, and for me and my kids, we ride Colfax. And so the protected path of Colfax is direct, straight, right into the city. Some small improvements on the viaduct would really help safety concerns, whether it was signage or sometimes they forget to clean it or they forget to cut the trees back as you enter onto the protected path on the viaduct. But from 17, I guess, into the shopping center on the west and then into the city on the east, what are the next steps?
Well, that's a great question. We are working actually with CDOT, and I believe Tony Brindisi is on the call currently. We are working with CDOT to show how to put some pavement markings potentially on Federal to guide users across into the stadium district. And we're working with the stadium district on bike facilities that will connect you through to the South Platte River Trail. So good news there. We are also working potentially with Edgewater and seeing what we can do to help improve that connection across Sheridan and into the Edgewater marketplace. I don't know if you're aware, but Edgewater is doing some pretty interesting and exciting planning for Sheridan. Again, Tony Brindisi, I believe, is still on the call. He's part of that as well. And it's a lot that's beyond what we can fill you in on now, but that we can, I can put the link to that planning in the chat after I've finished chatting. But we are looking at potential improvements there that would help that crossing.
Yeah, very cool. And I can tell that the properties have been purchased and there's, even on the Denver side, it looks like some real built environment changes coming to the Sheridan crossing. I would encourage, I'd encourage folks to look at the viaduct as you work with CDOT, because the viaduct, as opposed to going down to the river corridor, the viaduct, as you could go through our area campus, you could come in through the city, but the viaduct's a very direct route into the city. And if we could improve the bicycle, scooter, pedestrian crossing through the viaduct, I think it tends to be what we use the most.
Thank you. Let's go to Jonathan.
Sorry, real quick, just wanted to let you all know, Brindisi with CDOT Region 1 Traffic is here. Just letting you guys know. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. And I should also mention those markings on Federal. That's something that we are piloting with CDOT. So it's exciting to try some new things and hopefully improve our connections and clarity of connections and routes for our users.
Well, hey, just wanted to say thanks for this. This is a super welcome surprise. I didn't know this was in the pipeline, but for any of us who ride south of 17th, we know the conditions aren't great. I can see why it's being repaved, lots of potholes and more. Did just want to have just a quick question about the engagement in March. I know those dates aren't finalized. You were looking for some pop-up times, possibly in the park. Wondering if there'll be opportunities for online engagement for those who aren't able to attend either of those in-park sessions.
That's the March 3rd is an open house that would be in conjunction with this team here. And we can look into, it will be recorded, just like this meeting is recorded, and we can look into other opportunities for engagement beyond. I don't have a good answer for you yet, but we can look and see if there are some opportunities beyond folks looking at the recorded session, but you're always welcome to reach out with any comments or additional questions via email as well.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. There's a message, Karen, from Katie, who's going to help us with the notice for the open house, but also some concerns by Councilwoman Torres. So I'm going to move us along because I know we only have an hour for the meeting. And so I'm going to ask that if we can move from bike to our next slide and Vision Zero. And I think this is going to, Mike and Abby, you're going to introduce us to this.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. And yes, my name is Mike King, and Abhi Subramanian is my counterpart on the design side of the Vision Zero team. I'm a transportation planner. She's a transportation designer. And the Vision Zero team has identified West Colfax as a corridor that is in need of improvements that I'm sure all of you are aware from the West Colfax pedestrian and transit improvements that are coming as well. So just some context behind this project. As you can see, it's the same stretch of the corridor as the West Colfax pedestrian and transit improvements. The reason why Vision Zero has gotten involved is because one, it's on the high injury network. Two, it's a high priority area in the Dottie Equity Index. And three, it is there's been a recent crash surge on this corridor that we want to focus on. So what this effort entails is kind of like a pilot project prior to the pedestrian transit project. And what that means is we'll be installing paint and post near-term improvements. For those that don't know what paint and post project means, it's really kind of what you see on East Colfax currently, where we paint out or stripe out where the where bulb outs or medians will go for the longer term project. There's, again, the identified need for this project is because of this increased crash picture over the past few years. And the plan overall is to have completed design with installation anticipated for Q2 around Q3 of 2022, which means, late summer, early fall timeframe. So this effort has come from, again, a bunch of different projects kind of working together to accelerate what's being done for this West Colfax pedestrian crossing and transit improvements. But on top of that, we've also reviewed comments and we're a part of the NTMP projects for the West Colfax and Villa Park neighborhoods, seeing that West Colfax was a high priority area and a high concern area. Additionally, signal retiming that had occurred on this corridor was the Vision Zero project back in November of 2020. That included adjusting signal timings in green phases, as well as LPIs, which is a leading pedestrian interval. Leading pedestrian interval is when you'll see at an intersection, if you've seen them on West Colfax currently, where the pedestrian gets a signal prior to a vehicle getting a green light. This allows the pedestrian to kind of get a head start into the crosswalk as they have the right of way before right turning vehicles entering the intersection. Also, rapid response is another Vision Zero team that we have. Rapid response responds to every fatal crash that occurs in the city that we find that has an engineering mitigation effort. And we found ourselves repeatedly coming out to this stretch of the corridor over the last few years. And when that happens, we know that a quick spot treatment isn't really going to have that big of an effect. We need a full systemic approach and corridor-wide improvements. And then lastly, again, the East Colfax project. As we were completing that, we had a plan to continue to extend this to West Colfax as well. So with that, I'm going to get into the pedestrian crash map. And this is a map that I'm sure many of you have seen from the initial pedestrian improvement project that is still coming in 2024 with updated numbers. And as you can see here, every intersection has at least one, or almost every intersection has at least one serious or fatal crash that occurred with a pedestrian over the last 10 years. Many of these intersections also having more than one as well. But that's not the full picture. You'll see, again, this recent crash analysis we've done between 2019 and 2020 has a significant crash increase. And this is showing not only pedestrians, but drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians as well. And this specific slide is focusing on what's called a correctable crash. And not all crashes are correctable through engineering improvements, but we refer to these as, if we install some type of engineering improvement, there's a chance that that crash won't happen again. Crashes that don't really fit into this category are things that usually involve DUIs, people not wearing seatbelts or not being restrained properly. Those are not included in these statistics here. So of the total crashes, 131 of those crashes are things that we think that if we improve this corridor could be reduced significantly. And of that 131 crashes, there's been 12 serious and fatal crashes for all roadway users, again, between 2019 and 2020, which really means almost 1 in 10 crashes on this corridor result in a serious or fatal crash, which is, again, why we wanted to accelerate this effort. And you can see below that the breakdown of people involved in those crashes, whether it's driver, pedestrian, or cyclist. And one final slide on the crash picture here. This is kind of how we do our analysis on the Vision Zero side. We wanted to pull back the hood a little bit and show how we analyze these crashes. So you can see on the bottom of this page, there's a little legend showing what each color means and what the outline means as well. But we'll start from left to right on this map. And you can see at Stewart, there were two crashes that occurred. One was a fatal crash and one was a serious bodily injury crash. These were both left turning vehicles. And then we'll move to the right and you can see there was a pedestrian crash as well at Stewart that will be, again, helped with the crossing efforts through this project. Sorry, now we'll move to Raleigh. I see the cursor kind of bouncing around. At Raleigh Street, you can see there weren't any serious or fatal crashes occurring at these intersections, but still there were property damage only crashes, meaning that no one was injured in the crash, but there was vehicle damage and enough damage for a police officer to be involved in the crash and be called to the crash. And then mid-block between Raleigh and Quitman, there was additional pedestrian fatality with a vehicle striking pedestrian at mid-block crossing. And then lastly, at Quitman, you can see again, property damage only crashes occurring and there being a left turn crash coming from Quitman onto Colfax Avenue. Again, some of these crashes would then be mitigated by the improvements that are coming from our project.
Mike, can I just do a check-in with the CAG just to be sure that no questions or not comments about the solutions, but does anybody have any question about the data that Mike just shared? Don't want to get, okay, you're okay? All right, thanks.
Yes. And thank you, Catherine, feel free to stop me anytime we need to.
Oh, sure. I just want to check in with the CAG members.
Great. And I thought some things coming through the chat. Are there any questions in the chat as well?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. So again, background data, that was primarily the background data, and now just this is what the project will look like that's coming later this year, and it's again following suit with that. The longer term project that's coming between in 2024. And you can see there's just the screenshot below is really showing what these bulb outs will look like with, again, paint and post being installed and really narrowing the crossings for pedestrians, as well as kind of narrowing that view of the roadway for drivers to reduce speeds of drivers on this corridor. And every dot on the map above is showing where these types of treatments will be installed on the corridor. And one other thing that's shown on here is that we will be refreshing the crosswalks and stop bars along the corridor as well. And next slide here shows the painted medians, and this again will follow suit with the longer term project, and this is just kind of the pilot. I'm showing the initial efforts. You can see again in the image below, it's really just similar to many of our 4-lane arterial roadways will have that full-on striped painted median, and limiting some of those left turn movements that were causing some of those serious and fatal and property damage only crashes. And it is a little small, I apologize on screens, but if you can see in the screenshot in the center there on the bottom right corner, there's some hashed out lines, or sorry, bottom left corner, hashed out lines that are just refreshing existing shoulders that were painted on West Colfax previously. Just again, really reiterating that where the drive lane is versus where the gutter pan is, and leading up to those flex posts once again.
Again, just take a moment to see.
Perfect.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't drive very often, so I actually am not quite sure. So the
the striped yellow medians, that would be to discourage folks from kind of using that, what is currently a center sort of lane to turn off, turn left, or?
Correct. And
Oh, okay.
Yep, that's exactly it. And then the longer term project that's coming after this effort will solidify that median, and it'll be a full median that you typically see with the raised curb.
Okay, has this been the striped median? Is that on East Colfax?
In some places, not on the full stretch. I don't have off the top of my head exact intersections or locations where that is, but we can look that up for you.
Okay, thank you.
Just Mike, can I jump in real quick?
Oh, sure, Tony.
Apologize, I'll be very brief. Just to clarify something here, that stripe median becomes more than a discouragement. It actually becomes an enforceable non-ability to use that median for left turns, just to clarify.
Thanks, Tony. Lisa, did you get your question answered in the chat?
I did. Thanks,
Thanks,
Catherine.
Lisa. Thanks for using the chat.
And I don't want to. Yeah, and I didn't want to hold things up, but I was just curious because I cross Perry like every day. It's really dangerous. So I'm hoping that we don't have to wait till somebody gets hurt before they would actually include Perry in that. I mean, are we only putting in improvements where people have already gotten hurt or killed, or I'm not sure why they would not put something at Perry, because it's a really big crossing point. People coming from the light rail up, going up to north of Colfax up to the lake. There are a lot of people who cross there, and it is very dangerous. So I was just curious why they wouldn't put any improvements there.
And I'm going to ask Abby if she is on, if she would be able to answer that specific question. I believe it's because it's signalized, but Abby, can you please confirm that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So the reason why we're not making changes at Perry, like Mike alluded to, is because it's signalized. And I'm sorry, the camera's over here, but the big screen is over here. So I'm going to be looking at the big screen, but I am looking at you all. And at Perry, we also don't have any changes being proposed as a part of the larger effort. And the entire idea behind this project, the Vision Zero project, is to pilot the conditions that we'll be proposing in the big project. And so that's kind of why we're just trying to keep things as uniform as possible, so that in 2 years, when the big project rolls out with all the concrete changes, you're not adjusting to new traffic patterns.
Right. Thanks. I really appreciate that. And I apologize if I'm coming late to the game, but I've lived in this neighborhood for nearly 25 years, and Perry is very dangerous for pedestrians to cross at Perry, cross Colfax there. I've personally nearly been hit many times, like really seriously, having to jump out of the way of turning vehicles to not get hit. I've seen my husband almost hit. I've seen people in wheelchair. Like, it's really dangerous. So I appreciate that there's a signal there, but that's not enough. So whoever we need to talk to, like, that's really vital. Like, I'm just shocked that Perry, just because the signal there, that's not enough.
Well, I can also.
Can I just pop in real quick?
Sure.
Excuse me. Lisa, the project that's coming after with the ped and transit, we are adding bulb outs on the south side of Colfax, which will make for a slightly shorter crossing distance there. So we're not doing zero improvements there, but we're trying to alleviate that issue with the next project.
So I'd just like to add that Mike and Abby and Lisa, is that hearing Lisa Goldberg's comments and adding it to what the CAG is telling us. So that's really important. We want to hear back from you. And so I'm sure they're marking down that concern as well and adding it to their own studies on Perry. But this is exactly what we need to hear, that that there's a concern by Perry, and you live in the neighborhoods and understand what that is. So we want to acknowledge that we're hearing you, and certainly adding that to the list of concerns that we're hearing from community. So thank you for bringing it up, and never hesitate to do that.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And just one last thing, it's the left turn that seems to be the worst, like the left turn, people coming from north of Colfax and turning left onto Perry, left onto Colfax, coming, north, heading south. that seems to be the worst, or that's at least just anecdotally, that's where I've seen the most potential crashes. But anyway, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And Jaime, thank you for your comments as well. So that's very helpful. We save all the comments in the chat. So this is very helpful, adding to what Lisa said. So again, thank you.
Kath, could I just ask Lisa to write that down in the chat, that turning movement, just so we get that straight?
Yes.
Thanks, Beth.
Yeah, we'll do.
Hey, Shane.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to second Perry. I live on Raleigh, and Raleigh's all right. You know, it's not great, I wouldn't say, but when you cross onto Starbucks and the new development, it has a nice sidewalk. And Perry has got the 7-Eleven, it's got the McDonald's, and it's as you keep going forward, it's a very difficult pedestrian or bike path to get to the lake, and it's the major car traffic going north-south. It does end at the lake, but because Meade doesn't go through, you know, Perry's the way everybody goes around to get to Lowell or to get to the Highlands or whatever. So improvements on Perry, it's just the major intersection. It's the major space where people are moving through. And it's also the major space where so many people are around, walking to McDonald's or 7-Eleven, or the folks at the older folks home across the way. It's just a really busy corridor, the weed shop or it's just a Rose Lady stuff. It's got a lot going on. So anything to focus and put emphasis on the Perry exchange seems smart to me.
So we have quite a few comments about Perry. So we're noting those. Mike and Lisa and Abby are noting those. So thank you very much again. Continue to give us this feedback. It's exactly what we need.
Yeah, and if I can also add one more thing.
Sure, Abby.
I think Mike may have highlighted this earlier, but I'm not sure. So in case he didn't, one thing that we did move forward with late 2020, all the time is mixed up with 2020, but we added LPIs at many of these locations, including Perry.
Will you say what LPI means?
Yeah, so that means a leading pedestrian interval, which gives pedestrians a bit of a head start to start crossing Colfax. And that means that the southbound and the northbound left turning vehicles have a red light while the pedestrians get this head start. So we're trying to reduce that conflict a little bit. And so I do want to say that that's a small change that we've made, and not just at Perry, but at several of the signals along this stretch of the corridor, which we have noted seeing some level of improvement in terms of pedestrian crashes, in that we haven't really seen any. So there is a small change that has been done already.
All right, so I'm going to move us along. Mike, do you want to continue?
Absolutely. And we do have one more slide here, and it's just a little bit of a data to back up the improvements that are coming on the corridor. And this is just something kind of pulling back the hood a little bit to show that when we make decisions on a lot of our projects, we use crash reduction factors, and these are generated by state and federal reports, meaning that if a specific installation, engineering installation is installed, there is a typical reduction that could come from these crashes, come from these engineering improvements. I'm not saying that if we install a raised median, we're going to get exactly 23% reduction on this corridor. It's more of an estimation, but reason being of just why these improvements would be coming on these corridors is just showing that there is improvements typically expected in that crash picture down the line. Same with the paint and post bulb outs along the corridor. And long term, these will then turn into a larger scale paint and post bulb out, civil design concrete bulb outs through the longer term project.
Okay. Any other final comments on this and concerns that you'd like to bring up? Okay.
I do see a quick question coming through, Catherine. I want to definitely answer that one on the chat. So this is a correctable, means that it is a crash. It means that it is a crash that could be eliminated potentially by a engineering improvement. A non-correctable crash is something like a DUI or an unrestrained, someone not using a seatbelt properly. Would be what we consider the non-correctable crash based in the engineering improvement world. These are all still things that can be corrected through messaging, through communication, through other avenues, but in the engineering world. And I don't have the value for total crashes across the corridor at this time, but I can provide that to you, Jonathan, after our meeting.
So I'm gonna, in recognition of the little bit of time we have left, and I know that Lisa, you're ready to talk about West Colfax Pedestrian and Transit Project. I'm sorry to, I think we have about maybe 11 minutes that we can focus in on that.
Great. Yep. Thank you, Catherine, and thanks, Mike and Abby. Yep, I'm Lisa Hilt. I am the Doty project manager for the West Colfax Ped and Transit Improvements Project. Riley Lamy is our city planner. He did the concept study ahead of this project to get to where we are today. Our project team is Nancy Lambertson. She's the PM for Muller Engineering, our design consultant. We also have Fadia, our Doty transportation engineer. And as it's already been mentioned, we heard you, and we've invited Tony Brindisi with CDOT Traffic here, and he's here today. So Tony, thank you for coming today. We appreciate you. Thank you. Yep, we've already had a few public and stakeholder meetings for this project, and let's see. Oh, am I missing a slide? Can you go back one? No. Okay, I just want to
Sorry,
emphasize.
Lisa, I don't know where it is. So just explain to them what the purpose of the project is.
Sure. Okay, so just the rundown, just want to emphasize that the project goal is to improve pedestrian crossing safety along Colfax between Sheridan and Irving Street, to improve speed and reliability of transit service along this corridor. As Mike just went over, there's a lot of safety, crash data, a lot of issues, and I wanted just to emphasize that safety is a priority of this project. So I'll briefly go through the schedule here. So we've already presented the schedule at our last meeting, and we've had a few other stakeholder meetings as well. As I said, Riley had led the concept design back in 2019, and we had some public meetings back then to get some input on the design and on the concept. 2020 received all our funding through Elevate Denver Bond. And in 2021, we moved forward with full design of the project. So Muller Engineering is moving forward with design. We had our public meeting back in December of 2021. Just to remind you of the project, we had this project back in 2019 and we're moving it forward. We're here today at this red dot and at this CAG meeting, and we'll be having another public meeting, our final public meeting in March, followed by final design. We have construction running right after that from 2023 into 2024, and we're on a tight schedule. We did receive Safer Main Streets grant funding through CDOT. So CDOT is our partner on this project. It is a local agency project, and construction needs to be complete in 2024 for the funding requirements. Our next slide addresses comments that we have received from the public. So we've heard you. You've asked for LPIs. Abby just explained that about the lead pedestrian intervals that are already in place. I think she said there's 4 or maybe more. You've asked for additional traffic signals, specifically at Vrain and Lowell. And that was something that had come up in the original concept plan. So we did look into this. We did a warrant study on it. And per the warrant study, these signals were not warranted. Well, we can't put them in with this project. We have future-proofed it. So we will not be putting in medians at these intersections. So when these signals are warranted, we can put them in and not have to worry about taking out median for the project. We were asked to evaluate parking locations to not conflict with transit. We're looking at this and we're doing what we can right now. We're evaluating it. We've been asked to add bike green conflict striping at bikeway crossings. And this is currently being coordinated with CDOT. And I can't remember, Gabby, I think Gabby had some more information on where that is at.
Yeah, sorry. So this is a little bit alluded to what the actually what Karen Good presented earlier on 17th, that we're adding those green conflict markings across several of those bikeways. So we are working with CDOT on just identifying those, being able to install those at a couple of other corridors that are also owned by CDOT but maintained by DOTI. So for example, in this case in West Colfax, we'll be looking at working with them on getting approval potentially for the Tennessee neighborhood bikeway that we have going through the area as well, crossing Colfax.
Great, thank you, Gabby. And I just want to point out that this is being coordinated, but this is not part of the transit and improvement project, pedestrian and transit improvement project. We've also been asked to repurpose the eastbound turn lane at Irving. The eastbound side of the intersection is not part of this project. However, it is being coordinated with CDOT for a future project. We've been asked to add red light cameras, and that is not something that we are doing with this project, and that is something that requires CDOT approval. And I believe it also needs to go through DPD as well, Denver Police Department. We've asked to add traffic calming on local streets. And as I said before, this project is strictly along Colfax. However, these traffic calming on the local streets are being coordinated with the 311 requests. We've been asked for speed awareness signs, and those are also already in place. And I think that's where there's four signs are already in place along the Colfax corridor for this. And then I
think we
already went over LPIs, and then we've been asked to widen sidewalks. And that's not part of this project because we're more concerned with pedestrian crossings. The safety, we're concerned with the safety of the pedestrian crossings. The wider sidewalks will come as development goes through the corridor. So developers will be required to widen the sidewalk, so they'll design it and fund it. There are a few places where we are evaluating making a little bit wider with this project. So that is between Raleigh and Quitman, and that is from the Conveyo comments. So thank you for providing your comments. And now I'm going to let Riley go over some of the elements that we have already implemented, we're including in design or not including in design.
Thanks, Lisa. So I'll go over this pretty quickly since we kind of touched on some of the things from the previous comments. But again, some of the treatments that have recently been completed along West Colfax that we've already done to help make it safe are the LPIs that Mike and Lisa talked about earlier, the driver feedback signs that we have at 4 locations. And then the signal timing along the corridor was also recently reduced and adjusted back in 2020, and that is to prevent vehicles from speeding. So it actually is designed to provide natural places to stop and makes it so that vehicles can't speed too much as they're progressing down the corridor. And then the speed was recently reduced to 30 miles an hour. So those are some of the things that were recently completed. But I want to talk about what is coming from the permanent design. So as Mike talked about in the beginning, it's really the safety issues along West Colfax that we're trying to address and trying to improve as a part of this project. And that's why that's the overall priority and why the funding for the project has been prioritized to do that. And so the pedestrian bulb outs as well as the landscaped medians, those are what we have kind of, when we have evaluated the design and took back to our engineering team and everything, what we really have come up with as solutions to the safety challenges that we need to address. And so that's why those are being proposed into the design. And what that does is it helps to eliminate 60 different left turn conflicts from the overall corridor as well. You saw some of how where we're seeing some of those crashes happen now. And so that will eliminate the ability to make left turns in certain places along the corridor. And then, as Lisa did mention, we're also future proofing it so that in the future we can look at rain and lull where we want to add signals. And then two other things that haven't been mentioned yet are the transit component of the project. So this is one of the highest ridership corridors in the entire city. And so we are also adding special places that will improve the waiting area for transit. So give transit riders more places to wait. And those will have a safety benefit as well. And then transit along West Colfax will also get special signals that give transit buses the priority when progressing down the street. So it gives them more time to cross at a signal if they need, or it allows the green ball to stay on longer so that they can make it through the intersection. And again, that helps to reduce delay. The few things that we can't address in this particular project or design are we can't put marked crosswalks where there isn't a signal. And that's because, again, if we put marked crosswalks, that gives a pedestrian a perception that vehicles will stop for them. And so we only put those in most places where there's actually a signal in place. Red light cameras, I won't touch on because Lisa already mentioned that. And then wider sidewalks, we are not looking at that for the most part in the design. And again, that's just because the priority and the purpose behind the project is to improve the crossing safety. We totally agree that sidewalks are a priority and important. However, it's just that the funding that we have available was really geared towards improving the crossings. And that again is the kind of the greatest need for right now. So that's what we're starting with first.
So Riley, could we stop and ask the CAG members if they have any questions or comments they'd like to make on the information that they've received? I know it's a lot of information. We again apologize that we're laying so much on your plate, but I'm wondering if you have comments or concerns you'd like to share with the the project managers and Tony okay. And I'm going to call on Jonathan and then Shane.
Hey there. All right, let me get my hand down here. Yeah, a couple of questions and points of clarification for me. Really appreciate all this these designs. Super excited. I basically touch Colfax with my house. So, I see a lot of this dangerous activity all the time. Clarification on the lack of marking of crosswalks where there is no signal. I know we have at least one or two of those built today, just west of Irving. There is sort of like a gap in a median for partial crossing, but no striping. I know there are a number of places in this corridor where we're also having those break opens in the medians to cross. I'm really worried about not having the painted stripes because, well, I mean, in my experience out here, wherever there is a cutout, a curb cut for pedestrians to cross, where there's a pedestrian crossing, per Denver driving regulations, if someone starts walking into that crosswalk, like cars must stop. But drivers either don't know or most likely don't know, but definitely don't respect this. They only look out for pedestrians if there is a marking on the ground. So I'm worried that we already have one of those that basically no one uses because it's too dangerous. If we add a bunch more of those and don't mark them, it feels like we haven't really accomplished the goal of creating a crossing in between signals if we don't have markings on the ground. So I was wondering if that's something we can reconsider, or if you were just talking about certain ones of those crossings, or what.
Yeah, that's a great question. In some parts of Denver, we do have the marked crosswalks where there's not a signal, and those typically are on local or less busy streets. The reason why we actually have standards and guidelines that say when we can use the marked crosswalks and we can't, and those again are based on national best practices across the country. And what our guidelines say that will go by is that on a busy street like West Colfax, or on majority of, or let's say federal, a busy street like that when you mark a crosswalk and there isn't a signal, that it can actually decrease pedestrian safety, because again, it just gives that perception that vehicles are required to stop. And that doesn't always happen. And so that's why we're not looking at it unless there's a signalized location.
Okay. I mean, is that MUTCD standards or what? I guess my concern is, like you just said, it's pedestrians will use it because they expect vehicles are supposed to stop. And I mean, the fact is they are, like, it's already supposed to be the case. So, I mean, I'm worried if we don't have the stripings, it's even less likely that vehicles will do it. I mean, point taken that yes, vehicles often don't respect, when they're going a certain speed, vehicles often don't respect the markings anyway. But if our goal is to reduce the speeds and we're doing them some of the chicaning and like there should be more driver awareness here, I feel like we should also be making the attempt, like whatever we can, including painting, to get them to stop for pedestrians.
Can I jump in here real quick? This is
Sure,
Tony. Tony again from CDOT. Just to Jonathan, I appreciate your perspective. It is a perspective that we do hear occasionally, obviously at CDOT. But to Riley's point, just kind of wanted to reemphasize a couple things. Different corridors can allow for different things, whether drivers should or should not, or shall, it's a shall condition, right? Stop at a crosswalk. The fact is that in corridors of this type, they tend not to, when there isn't an expectation of a pedestrian being in that location. So in this case, and along with Federal Boulevard, for example, we have several areas where there are cut throughs meant to facilitate kind of that mid-block crossing. But our intention is not to necessarily channelize people there. We'd rather have them go to the signalized crossings where, for instance, Abhi spoke of the LPIs earlier, which provide a much greater safety benefit. The only reason those cut throughs are there is because we recognize that there are some folks that won't walk the distance. And frankly, we'd rather have them go there than stand on a median that's not designed for it. So to that point, there are limitations in our ability to be able to put a crosswalk up without a controlled way to get people across. Just kind of reemphasizing basically what Riley said there, just from the CDOT perspective.
And Jonathan, can I encourage you to put your note, your comment in the chat so that we have that, so that we don't want to forget what you said, because obviously this is today. But as the planners and the project managers looking at anything, we want to keep those comments in mind. And while we're not able to do it now, having those comments as a historical record is very important to us, so that as we look back, we can be reminded.
Sure thing.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I'll go to Andy.
Yeah, just two kind of quick questions about clarification. So I typically cross at Vrain, and where there is nothing to kind of help me out but my own wits. And that's one of the things I was really looking forward to, is the signal. I understand it's not warranted at the time. What would the timeline be for when they would reevaluate that? I know that there's some more development still to come on just these couple streets here, some larger, well, maybe not, who knows, anything could happen. But if development comes and there's more folks living, when does that kind of reevaluation of a signal happen?
I might let Fadia, who's one of our engineers on the call, might have her answer that question. One of the things I did want to point out, though, is that when the near term or the Vision Zero project gets installed and paint in post, that will give us the ability to sort of reevaluate the corridor again. So we may be able to have the opportunity to look at it sooner than later, and then be able to address that signal outside of that project at a later date. But I wanted to just, that might be a good question for Fadia as well.
Yeah, Riley, I agree that after Vision Zero project goes in, they are going to do an after study just to get some counts, and we can use that count to reassess if a signal is warranted there. Otherwise, if there's other development as private development on Vrain that will trigger more volume there, we can ask the developer to do a study to see if a signal is warranted there. If nothing happened within a year or so, feel free to call and request a signal evaluation in a couple of years, I would say, like a year or two.
Yeah, thank you so much for that clarification. And
Yeah.
I know there will be a little cut through, kind of just a block, half a block away. So I'll look forward to that.
Yes.
Right. The other quick question was just about, in the previous draft plan, I had seen that one of the bus stops that's close to me was going to be eliminated. And I hadn't seen like a follow-up draft plan. I wondered, and I also just don't know this, who makes the decision about where bus stops go? And how does that decision get made?
Great question. So that's RTD, and the bus stop consolidation was based on a report that they did, and they basically identified certain stops that they could eliminate based on ridership, and then consolidate in order to reduce delay. So the stop consolidation is basically to reduce delay along the street. But yeah, they're directly involved in making the decision. So we're just sort of implementing what we've worked with them on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Shane, can we ask you to be our last comment for the evening?
Oh, sure. I noticed that there's a lot of people with mobility impairments who are crossing the road from what's a home for people with mobility impairments on the south side of Colfax and on the north side. And then from Colfax Elementary in Cheltenham, the kids are going back and forth, and the Lake kids are going back and forth too real quick. And a lot of people are crossing without going to the main thoroughfares where the crosswalks are. A number of years ago, we painted the crosswalks, I think with the bid and maybe Place Matters or something. We made them a more vibrant, artistic crossing, and it maybe made it more attractive to cross at those locations. I'm wondering if we could encourage more of those built environment art type of installations on the major crossing areas, so that it emphasized pedestrians and also maybe made it more attractive for people to cross in the designated area.
Thank you, Shane.
Shane,
Are you bringing in art in public places? And I know that's near and dear to many of the people on the call.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment, and that's a great suggestion. For this project, we're too late in the game to evaluate for this project, but I think for the corridor, that's a great comment and a great thing to bring up for the next project coming in. And it is something that art would have to be a part of, I believe. Fadia, I don't know if you have any other comments on this.
Not about the art stuff. I'm not involved in that part.
So I'm just going to direct Lisa and Tony to take a look at an additional note from Jonathan, and perhaps as we wrap up, you might be able to respond in the chat with him. I know we're running a little bit late on time, or right at time, and I know we wanted to offer an opportunity for anybody who has from the community who has announcements they'd like to share with the rest. I think that's our next spot, right, Anthony?
Yep.
Yep.
Anybody before we share the next meeting, if anyone has any announcements to share? Okay, if not, so our next meeting, which will be a virtual public meeting, is going to be held on March 3rd. Again, the meeting was recorded in both English and Spanish tonight. I'm going to ask the presenters, the Dottie staff that presented tonight, to review their slides, and if there are any acronyms in your slides, to please spell out. Mike, and I thought of you, Mike, because one of your slides said SBI when you were presenting, and if someone wasn't at the meeting tonight, they may not know what an SBI is. So I think the more that we can, if they did the recording, if they listened to the recording, then obviously they would understand what SBI meant. But we will make sure that that if there are acronyms in our presentation, that we spell out what those acronyms are. We will post the meeting recordings in both English and Spanish on the website, and I will put that in the chat momentarily. And then I will send an email out with the tonight's PowerPoint presentation. Switch it from a PowerPoint to a PDF. I will also include the link for the website. And then if you have any additional questions from any of our presenters tonight, my contact information is on the website, and I can make sure that I direct you to the appropriate person to get your questions answered. So with that, Catherine, I think that's everything that I have.
Jonathan, did you have a last comment?
Yes, quick question. This says next meeting is March 3rd. Both updates tonight also had their next meeting on March 3rd. Is this all one meeting, or are these different meetings?
Look at us, we coordinated it all.
Yeah, it's all one meeting.
Okay, all right.
You can come to one meeting and get all of it.
Great, thanks.
I jump in here real quick. Sorry, I know we're at the end. We're over time for anybody.
Sure, Tony.
I wanted to address Jonathan's question. You guys asked us to read that question in the text. It took me a minute. It was kind of a long question. So the long and the short of that is, red light cameras have some pluses and minuses, frankly. Without getting too into the weeds, there are some safety concerns that also accompany red light cameras. You're welcome to email me offline if you want to talk at something at length about that, Jonathan. You can get my email address from the folks on this call. But as far as who should be requesting them, these requests to CDOT come from the local agency. So there isn't a real avenue. You can certainly put it through a customer service concern, CDOT's customer service website. But generally the formal request comes through the local agency on the red light cameras. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to add
Thank you,
that.
Tony. Thank you, Jonathan, for the question. We're going to add Katie to our meeting invitation at casearthlinkscolorado.org, earthlinkscolorado.org. So thank you, everybody. We're sorry we kept you a few minutes late. We're trying to be very conscious of your time. And so I just wish you a warm week, rest of the week, and a warm weekend. And we'll see you on March the 3rd. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Everyone have a wonderful evening. Stay
Thank you.
warm.
Thank you.
And Michelle and Francisco, you can stop the recording if you hadn't already done that.
Anthony, did you need to?
I have it, so don't, give me a second. Don't talk.